So one of the things that people tend to know about policymakers is that they're generalists, and they are not necessarily as research literate as researchers are. And what this means is they don't necessarily understand how researchable hypotheses work and that they need to be tested. That's fairly generally known. But something that is less well known is the nature of questions that policymakers are asking. Researchers tend to ask very small, very focused questions where you can come up with a fairly definite answer. In contrast, questions that policymakers ask are absolutely huge. So a question a researcher might ask is, does more intensive agriculture lead to greater greenhouse gas emissions? That's a very simple question. This is just a hypothetical question. But that's not really what's interesting to a policymaker. A policymaker is under pressure to increase yields, to increase labour productivity, or to put policies in place that do these things, to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, to improve the water quality, to do all these sorts of things. So the policy question is going to be around whether you can increase agricultural productivity and returns to household labour and returns to land and develop a better nutrition strategy, and oh, by the way, and we need to do climate change, we need to do greenhouse gas emissions reduction at the same time. Now, the policy question is not amenable to a research project. It's lots of different research projects that all tangle up together. A researcher is going to ask a very narrow question, a policymaker is going to ask a much broader question. And so you need to be able to set your small research question, your narrow research question, in that much wider context. And what that means is being able to interpret the results of your research in that wider context that the policymaker is interested in. The next issue for policymakers is that the process of policymaking sometimes will follow a really regular cycle, and sometimes it won't. And sometimes it will move as slowly as a glacier, and sometimes it will move as fast as Usain Bolt. And as a researcher, you can't tell which type of process or what speed of process is your policymaker, your friendly policymaker, is going to be subject to at any particular time. So you need to be able to do two things. You need to be able to give policymakers your best guess. This is our best guess of what's going on, but this is the risk that our best guess is wrong, and this is the risk that if you use this evidence, you're going to get it wrong. Policymakers do respond quite well to thinking about the risks associated with getting it wrong, because the worst thing for a minister is to be told that he's wrong, and to be told he or she is wrong in the press. So you do need to be able to give best guesses. This is what's emerging from our research. It may not be used in the policy process, but it may start them thinking and then come back to you for the final answers. But at the same time, you need to be ready for a really quick response, to come in and to say, this is what we know, this is what we don't know, this is the state of play for this particular issue, because it may be that the policymaker is under tremendous time pressure and has got to get something to the head of department or to the minister or to Parliament within a very short frame of time. So you've got to be able to provide your best guess of evidence as it emerges, but you've also got to be able to provide it very, very rapidly when it's needed. The other thing that you need to take into account is that there are different types of policymaker. It's a mistake to lump them all together under the title a policymaker, because you can distinguish between ministers and other politicians, including members of parliament and political parties. They all contribute to the policy-making process, as well as the civil servants, who are the bureaucrats, the kind of engine of policy-making. But even within each of those groups, there are very, very different people with very, very different incentives to use research-based evidence. There are some people who believe very strongly in delivering greater public value, delivering greater public goods, and they get very frustrated that the politics tends to get in the way from what they see as a rigorous evidence-based policy-making process. There are other people who don't have the time or the capability or the resources to be able to do good evidence-based policy. And then there's a third type of people who are very political, even within the organisation. They are keen on advancing their careers. They see politics as the way to do that. And they behave very politically, and for them it's the evidence that gets in the way rather than the politics. So there are some people for whom neither politics nor evidence are terribly important. They're just getting on with their job. There are other people who have a burning sense that they want to deliver greater public value, and then there's a final group who act very, very politically and see the evidence as kind of getting in the way of what they feel aligns with their values. Because we all have values and beliefs about what is important. And the problem is that you can't tell which policymaker you're working with. So you need to understand that if you happen to work with an evidence-based a policymaker who believes firmly in the evidence base, you'll do well. If you happen to work with a policymaker for whom politics is extremely important, they may take less notice of it. And unfortunately, you can't tell which is going to be which.